Hi, I'm Sid Davis. I'm the Director of Music and Fine Arts at St. Luke's United Methodist Church, and this is Methodantics, Investigating Dusty Ideas, where we talk about how we can help you answer questions that you may have had about worship your whole life and just didn't ask. And this is my friend Justin, and he's going to introduce himself and our topic.
As Sid said, my name is Justin Bair. I'm the Associate Director of Worship and Music at St. Luke's. And I, among the utmost, had these kinds of questions, and I would ask Sid, do you know how this works? And sometimes he would, and sometimes he would look it up for me and then tell me. But our question today is actually part of an emailed question that we got a few weeks ago. But it's part of our plan. So our question today is, why do we have acolytes in a service? What are acolytes? Why do we have them? And then, of course, why do we have candles in a service? Because they're inextricably linked. So if you've ever been to a traditional service, either at St. Luke's or other traditional Methodist services, you know that we start these services with a processional. And that starts usually in the narthex, some waiting area in the back, goes all the way up to the front. And as Sid mentioned a few weeks ago, that's symbolic, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, of the Triumphal Entry into Jerusalem. It's a very, very Eastery resurrection praise kind of a feel.
It's true.
Is that right?
True. So it's a sign act. It's and of course, sign acts are only really sign acts if you understand what's happening. Otherwise, they just are things that are happening. But yeah, it's a indication that the service is beginning. It is a worshipful thing. It's not just walking in all in two lines down the aisle.
And you've mentioned sign acts before, but just remind us what a sign act is.
Well, it's anything like if we crossed ourselves, that's a sign act. Standing to recite, to say what we believe is a sign act. The processional is a sign act. What the acolytes do that we're going to talk about in just a minute. All those things are sign acts. So facing the cross, those sorts of things.
The idea that it's symbolic, but it's something that you do that's symbolic. It's not a physical.
Right. It elevates the moment. Okay.
So we process, and at the front of every processional are the acolytes. They're in their robes, which we'll talk about in a minute. They're carrying torches. They're the ones who lead us in, and it's not necessarily I would say, hierarchical thing. They're leading us in because their torches are lit and they are bringing in the light of Christ. It's the whole reason that we have fire in a service at all. We have light in the service, and so they bring this light of Christ into the service. The candles on the altar or near the altar are lit, so that this celebrating the light of Christ resides in the service with us. And the acolytes will they'll go off to the side, they'll sit down. In our services, if we have a baptism, they'll assist with the baptism, making sure that everything's cleaned and the clergy is taken care of. And then at the end of the service, it's all pretty simple. At the end of the service, they come up and they have to make sure that they relight their torches before they extinguish the candles and take it out, because they're transferring the light of Christ from the candles, and they're leading this processional out of the sanctuary to show, this is usually after the benediction or as the benediction is happening, to show that the light of Christ does not stay here, that we are the light of Christ and is being taken out into the world.
That's right. That's right. And I said this a minute ago about sign acts, but it's true of anything symbolic. It's really only symbolic if people understand what the symbolism is, or that it is depicting something. It's helping us remember something and understand something. But yeah, that's right.
It's not like we need the light of the candles to function. Right. Like the room is too dark and we just have to make sure the candles are lit.
That's right.
That it's a symbolic presence there. So
the acolytes will help, like on Good Friday, with all the extinguishing of all the candles during the 7 last words and things like that.
Yeah, wrapping up the paraments and altar elements and things like that. So you'll notice if you've seen our acolytes or others in different services, so they wear robes. Theirs are called albs, which are, we talked about robes actually in our very first episode, and the idea of these black robes, sometimes they're white, but ours are black. We want them to sort of disappear, as it were. We don't want the person who's doing this thing to stand out. We want the symbol and the idea to be the thing that's up front. So you don't want to be thinking about what that person is wearing as they are bringing in the light of Christ. Everybody wears the same thing. So they wear their albs, their robes. It's tied up by a rope that I learned well into my tenure here. It's called a cincture, which just makes total functional sense. You're cinching up your robe. And there is a very specific way to tie it, which I had to YouTube to make sure, because man, like those poor kids in the back trying to get ready for the service, just like throwing lassos and trying to get this thing around them. I did YouTube it so I could learn the real way to tie a cincture. Acolyte itself, the word acolyte is from the Greek, and it just means attender. It's which I feel like is most prominent when they're helping with baptisms, but it's just somebody who is there to help with the service. In this case, the primary responsibility bringing in the light. Do you feel like it's fair to compare them to like altar boys in a different tradition?
Yeah, I do. Acolytes serve a lot of the same purposes, although an altar boy in a Catholic church is going to have way more responsibility. It's much more complicated. But yeah, I think so. I think it's interesting to note too, the silver crosses that they wear on a chain around their neck were made by our own Joe Eason, who was, back before he sort of retired from doing this, was a really wonderful silversmith. And that's where those crosses came from.
I had no idea. It's very fun to hear about the things that we see were such an integral part of our community. We talked about some of those elements, like our paraments, they're expensive on purpose, or they're handmade by our people, because it's hard to make something cheap holy. So we have these things that are set apart for this purpose, and I love that they're made by our people. I didn't even know that.
Right, our very own.
And I sort of laugh every time I hear altar boy, because it's like, surely that's got to be just a colloquialism. Sure, they're called something else, I guess, in a Catholic church. Are they called acolytes?
If they are, it's not at the tip of my tongue at this moment. I dated a Catholic girl in high school, but that's
as this close.
I got
nearly Catholic, visited at least. So speaking of altar boys, our acolytes are always children. I know that we've used adults for other services. Like I want to say it was our Ash Wednesday service, our noon service that happens in the middle of the school day. It's really hard to get a kid to serve, so we would have adults. But is that something that, like, it has to be a child? Is that just one of our choices, something that we like to do?
I think in most churches where you see candles being lit, procession being led, a crucifix being carried, I think most of the time you'll see it being young people. I'm a huge believer, as you know, in young people participating as worship leaders, and they need jobs to do. And I'm sure there would be adults that would jump into that role if we needed them to, but I like for young people to feel like I'm needed here. I can do something, I can contribute. That's why youth choir is so important to me. But I would say the preponderance of them in churches everywhere are young people.
Yeah. So you mentioned the word crucifer. So there are two things that they would often lead in with. I think in I want to say it's Christmas Eve services. It's been nearly a year now. Or in Easter, I know for sure we process in with the crucifer. But we don't do that every Sunday. I know that some churches, the very first thing to come in is the cross. I know that we do that sometimes.
Well, we will often do that if the first hymn is Lift High the Cross, because duh. And actually, I think and I'm correcting myself, I think the actual term is a processional cross, and I want to say the person carrying it is the crucifer, is that right? But yes, the acolytes do that too. We have a handsome brass cross that was given years ago to St. Luke's. We used to have one that was much, much smaller, and it sort of got lost. And then we followed that one with the one we've got now.
Well, and there's another arcane term that when I say it, you'll know why it kind of fell out of use. But we just call Acolyte torches, but the, I guess, old Latin version was a Lucifer, because Lucifer just means light bringer. And we would have crucifers and lucifers in the service, but with a Catholic lore, or I guess a traditional lore of calling Satan Lucifer, didn't sound like a very good thing to bring into the service with you, but that was one of their original names. So in other sort of service attendance, I know not necessarily in the Methodist tradition, but there are vergers also. Vergers are like kind of service custodians. Having just learned this word fairly recently, it didn't really dawn on me that I guess my job is kind of a verger. I'm the Associate Director of Worship and Music, but I'm more specifically a worship coordinator. I make sure that everything is as it should be every Sunday morning. And so vergers and acolytes, as I lead acolytes and I organize them and help them get set for their Sunday mornings, I am, I guess, in a way, their verger, a verger.
You see that primarily, I think, in Europe and the UK. And those people are adults, and that's a job, like an occupation. And vergers are super important because they oversee all of the very important minutia of a worship service, from the paraments to overseeing worship assignments to making sure that the room is really cared for. I often say, I just want somebody to walk into the choir room and think, somebody cares about this place. And that's what vergers do. They care about all of that.
Yeah. So in all of these elements, we have, of course, the candles themselves. So our candles aren't candles so much as they are like tiki torches, I suppose. They're filled with the fuel, and that helps them to, not melt and get wax everywhere. I imagine that's just a very functional thing, so we don't have to like constantly replace candles. But there's at our candles, on top of them, there's a little brass piece called a follower. And besides serving kind of an ornamental purpose for us, it doesn't serve a functional purpose because our candles don't melt. But it would, I guess, as a candle would melt, it would follow that candle down, because it's right next to the flames, brass, it gets hot. So it kind of continues to melt everything nice and even uniform as it goes down. Early on, I want to say it was like a couple of Sundays in for me, I'm panicky and trying to make sure like everything is going right. And we have some of our acolytes are a little younger, and as I was, they have a little more trouble reaching all the way up and extinguishing that candle. And so there's this kind of little bell extinguisher on the torch. And so he did it, and he kind of like pulled on it and then lifted it off, and without even noticing, he pulled off the follower with it. And
they're heavy.
They're heavy. They weigh, like a pound and a half maybe, and they're tiny. And so he's processing it back, and the few people that noticed were just waiting with bated breath, like, when is this going to fall out?
One of those was me.
Made it all the way to the very end, and we have slate floors in our sanctuary, and just before we got into the narthex to close the doors, the thing popped out and bounced and made the most resounding sound that felt embarrassing for me. And poor kid.
Yeah, I was just saying over and over in my head, go fast, go fast, go fast, before it falls out.
Gentle.
Make it.
So at the end of all of these episodes, we like to ask questions of each other to help you guys get to know us as much as we are getting to know our own tradition. And a question that I've asked for a long time is kind of a general like icebreaker question I like, is if you had to eat the same meal once a day, every day for the rest of your life. Basically, it's another way of asking like, what's your favorite thing to eat? But It's very, you know, it's not just your favorite thing. Like it's got to be something you could actually eat once a day, every day, rest of your life. Sid?
Well, this is a hard question for me because I pretty much eat anything. I'm happy eating. I don't eat a whole lot. I know it doesn't look like I don't eat a whole lot, but I don't eat a whole lot. And Justin always makes fun of me because I have bacon and eggs for breakfast every day, every single day, which I love breakfast. But in sitting here thinking about it, I think if you're going to eat a meal every day for the rest of your life, it probably needs to be something that you consider as a real comfort food. And, you know, sort of standard B flat as it may be, I love spaghetti and meatballs. So I would choose spaghetti and meatballs.
I kind of knew you were going to say that.
There you go.
So I like to say there's, you know, food serves two purposes. You got to eat two different kinds of food. There's food that's good for your body, and there's food that's good for your soul. You got to have both. If you just eat celery all the time, you may be pencil thin, but you are not happy. You got to eat food that makes you happy. So do you ever change up? Like, do you ever do scrambled eggs and peppered bacon, or like maple bacon? And
Cindy really needs to be on this call because she's the breakfast maker. She's all the meal maker. And I mean, you know, yeah, she'll change it up, but it's bacon and eggs, and I'm so happy. Toast.
So my answer to this question had always been the same exact answer, and honestly, it probably would still be, which is this very specific dish. It's honey seared chicken from Payway, and if you've ever had it, you know, it's just so delicious. It's very, very like sweet and sugary. I don't eat as much now because I'm 34 and my metabolism is slowing down, and it hurts me sometimes when I eat it. So I don't eat that one quite as much anymore, but easily. And I could kind of joke with that because when I was in college, especially, I would eat it easily 3 to 4 days a week for dinner.
That's really specific.
Yeah, but it's that good though.
Oh, I don't doubt it. Love Payway.
So that's it for us this week. If you have any questions, if you want to respond about what you see here, or you want to know more about what we do, or you want us to answer any more questions, you can email any one of us. My email is jbair@stluxmethodist.org, or you can email Sid, sdavis@stluxmethodist.org, and we would love to hear from you.
We would. Thanks for being with us today.
Have a good week.
Bye.